The massive space station hung in the darkness like a glowing city. Haven Prime was the biggest thing Dr. Elena Rodriguez had ever seen. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its ports. Each ship looked different from the others. Some were round like eggs. Others stretched out like long snakes. All of them were beautiful and peaceful looking. Elena walked through the main corridor with careful steps. Everything around her was made from materials she had never seen before. The walls seemed to glow with their own light. Strange plants grew in gardens that floated in the air without soil. Music played softly from somewhere, but she could not see any speakers. Other beings moved through the halls around her. Most of them were taller than humans. Some looked like walking crystals that sparkled when they moved. Others had soft fur and large eyes like gentle deer. A few floated instead of walking, their bodies made of what looked like living water. Elena was the first human to ever walk these halls. Earth had only made contact with these aliens 18 months ago. Before that, humans thought they were alone in the universe. Now, Elena knew better. The galaxy was full of life, and most of it was nothing like humans. She reached the great council chamber and stopped. The room was huge. Hundreds of seats formed circles that went up and up like a theater. In the center was a platform where speakers could address everyone at once. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, making everything easy to see. Elena took her seat in the section marked for new members. She was the only one sitting there. Earth was still on trial, still proving that humans could be trusted to join this peaceful community. A tall being made of living crystal walked to the center platform. This was Speaker Zethkara from the world called Quartz Prime. When Zeth spoke, the words came out like beautiful music. Friends of peace, Zethkara began. We meet today because our way of life faces a terrible threat. The Vector Dominion continues to destroy everything we have built. A hologram appeared above the platform. It showed a map of the galaxy with red marks spreading across one edge like a disease. Each red mark was a world that had fallen to the Vector. In the past month, 3 more systems have been lost, Zethkara continued. The worlds of Gentle Stream, Crystal Falls, and New Harmony are no more. Billions of peaceful beings are dead or enslaved. Murmurs of sadness and fear filled the chamber. Elena watched the other species react to this news. She saw tears on furry faces. She saw crystal beings dim with sorrow. These were people who had never known real war. Another hologram appeared. This one showed the Vector themselves. They looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs. Their ships were dark and covered in weapons. Their cities looked like military bases. Our defense forces cannot stop them, Zethkara said, with obvious pain. We built our ships for peace, not war. We trained our people to help others, not to fight the Vector. See this as weakness. Elena had read the reports about Vector attacks. They were not pretty. The Vector took worlds by force and turned the people into slaves. Those who fought back were killed. Those who could not work were killed. Children were taken from their families and raised to serve the Dominion. We must find a way to stop them, said a delegate from the soft-wing people. These beings looked like large butterflies with intelligent eyes. But how can we fight when fighting goes against everything we believe? Perhaps we can negotiate, suggested another voice. This came from one of the floating water beings. Surely the Vector wants something we can give them without violence. They want our worlds, Zethkara replied sadly. They want our resources. They want us as slaves. What can we negotiate with that? The debate went on for hours. Some suggested hiding. Others wanted to build better defenses. A few talked about running away to find new homes far from Vector space. But Elena could see that none of these ideas would work. The Vector were hunters, and these people were prey. Finally, Zethkara called for volunteers. Who, among our member species, will help defend the innocent? Who will stand with us against this darkness? One by one, The delegates stood to offer help. The crystal people offered to hide refugees in their deep mines. The soft wings promised to carry supplies to besieged worlds. The water folks said they would heal the wounded. All good offers, all useful. None of them would stop the Vector from killing and enslaving billions more people. Alina stood up. Every eye in the chamber turned to look at her. She was small compared to most of the other beings there. Her brown hair and brown eyes seemed plain next to their exotic beauty, but she did not feel small inside. Earth offers military assistance, she said in a clear voice. The chamber fell silent. Alina could hear her own heartbeat. She knew that most of these people saw humans as just another peaceful farming species. Earth's first scans had shown green fields and blue oceans. They had seen cities full of art and music. They did not know about Earth's other side. Military assistance? Zethkara asked. The crystal being sounded confused. Do you have weapons we could use? Ships, perhaps? Alina smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that had found prey. We have something better than weapons, she said. We have soldiers. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small device. With the press of a button, she sent a single word across space to Earth. The word was simple. The word was final. Deploy. On Earth, alarms began to sound in military bases around the world. Ships that had been built in secret began to move. Soldiers who had trained for this moment grabbed their gear and ran to their stations. The galaxy had asked for protectors. They were about to learn what protectors from a death world looked like. Alina sat back down and waited. Around her, the peaceful beings of the galaxy continued to debate and worry. They had no idea that help was already on the way. They had no idea that Earth's children were coming to teach the Vector what happened when you threatened something humans had decided to protect. The war was about to change in ways no one could imagine. Colonel Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and watched the stars shift from lines back to points of light. The jump was complete. They had arrived in Vector space. Report, Jake said to his crew. All ships accounted for. Sir, replied Lieutenant Lisa Park from her station. 6 destroyers, 2 heavy cruisers, and 1 carrier. All systems green. Jake nodded and looked at the main screen. The human fleet hung in space like a pack of wolves. Their ships were nothing like the beautiful vessels of the Galactic Council. Human warships were built for one purpose only: to kill other ships and the people inside them. The Retribution was covered in thick armor plating. Weapon ports dotted its hull like the eyes of a spider. Long-range sensors swept the area constantly, looking for threats. Everything about the ship said one thing: danger. Contact on sensors, called out Ensign Bobby Kim from the scanner station. Harmony Station, bearing 27 Mark IV. Distance, 50,000 kilometers. I see it, Jake said, studying the readout. Harmony Station was huge, built to house 50,000 peaceful beings. Right now, it was under attack. 12 Vector warships surrounded it, like sharks around a wounded whale. Sir, Lisa said quietly, the station's shields are down to 30%. Jake watched the tactical display. The Vector ships were big and ugly, covered in spikes and weapons. They fired constantly at the station, slowly breaking down its defenses. Behind the station, Jake could see the ships of the Galactic Council's defense force. They were hiding like children behind their mother's skirt. Open a channel to the Council ships, Jake ordered. A face appeared on the screen. It belonged to Captain Veltar of the Crystal People. His voice shook with fear and shame. Human vessel, you must retreat. The Vector have too many ships. We cannot win this fight. Captain Veltar, Jake said calmly. Move your ships to minimum safe distance. We'll handle this. But you only have 9 ships. They have 12. Jake almost smiled. These poor people thought numbers were what mattered in a fight. They had never learned that sometimes a wolf pack could bring down a whole herd. "Trust us," Jake said, and closed the channel. He turned to his weapons officer. "Commander Garcia, target the largest Vector ship. Prepare full missile spread." "Aye, sir." "Missiles armed and ready." "Communications, open a channel to the Vector fleet, all frequencies." The face that appeared on screen was like something from a nightmare. War Chief Gractel had yellow eyes, sharp teeth, and scales that looked like armor. Scars covered his face from dozens of battles. "So?" Gractel hissed. "More prey arrives to feed us. Your pathetic ships cannot save these weaklings. Surrender now, and I might let some of you live as slaves." Jake looked at the alien warrior for a long moment. He had seen bullies before. Earth was full of them. The only language bullies understood was force. "War Chief Gractel," Jake said in a voice like ice. "This is Colonel Morrison of the Terran Expeditionary Force. You have 30 seconds to cease fire and withdraw, or we will remove you by force." Gractel's laugh was like broken glass. "Remove us? You and what army, little man?" "This army," Jake said, and nodded to his weapons officer. The Retribution fired first. 20 missiles streaked toward the Vector flagship. Behind them came Kinetic, rounds moving at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The other human ships opened fire at the same moment. The Vector had shields, but they were designed to stop the weak weapons of the Council races. Human weapons were something else entirely. The missiles punched through the shields like they were not there. The kinetic rounds hit. A moment later, Gractel's flagship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. The blast was so bright, it lit up the dark space around them. "Target the next ship," Jake ordered. The second Vector vessel tried to run, but human missiles were faster. It died before it could complete its turn. The third ship lasted a few seconds longer, just enough time to fire back. Its shots bounced off the Retribution's armor like rain off a roof. In less than 5 minutes, 4 Vector ships were gone. The remaining 8 began to retreat, their crews screaming into their radios about Death World monsters and impossible weapons. "Sir," Lisa reported, "the remaining Vector ships are jumping to hyperspace." "They're gone." Jake watched the enemy ships disappear. Around Harmony Station, the peaceful aliens were probably staring in shock. They had just seen their nightmare end in minutes. "Damage report?" Jake asked. "Minor scoring on the port armor," Garcia replied. "No injuries, no system damage." Jake nodded. That was the difference between prey animals and predators. Prey animals ran in groups and hoped their numbers would save them. Predators hunted in packs and used their brains to win. "Open a channel to Harmony Station," Jake ordered. The being who appeared on screen was one of the deer people, with large eyes and soft fur. She was crying tears of relief. "Human ships," she said, "we cannot thank you enough. You saved us all." "Just doing our job, ma'am," Jake replied. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical assistance?" No. The station shields held. "But how did you do that? How did you destroy them so easily?" Jake thought about how to answer. These people had lived in peace for thousands of years. They had never learned that sometimes the sheep needed wolves to protect them from other wolves. "We're from Earth," he said simply. "We know how to fight." The truth was more complicated than that. Humans had spent their entire history learning how to kill each other more efficiently. They had turned warfare into a science. Every human ship carried the lessons of 10,000 years of conflict. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "we're getting reports from across the sector. Vector ships are broadcasting warnings about us. They're calling us Death World predators." Jake smiled. "Good. Fear was a weapon too, and the Vector were about to learn what real fear felt like." "Set course for the next Vector position," he ordered, "and send a message to Admiral King. Tell him the wolves are hunting." In the days that followed, word spread through Vector space like wildfire. A new species had entered the war. A species that fought like devils and showed no mercy to those who threatened the innocent. Ships that had ruled the galaxy through fear were running from smaller, human vessels. The Vector had spent decades terrorizing peaceful worlds. Now they were learning what terror felt like when it was directed at them. War Chief Gregtol's replacement, War Chief Sektar, gathered his remaining ships and studied the reports. These humans were different from anything the Vector had faced before. They did not run when outnumbered. They did not surrender when threatened. They fought with a cold efficiency that chilled even Vector blood. What are they? Sektar asked. His advisors. The answer came from an unexpected source. A Vector scout who had observed human space sent a terrifying report. Earth was not a peaceful farming world. It was a death world where apex predators had learned to cooperate. Every human was a warrior. Every human child learned to fight before they learned to read. They are what we pretend to be, the scout reported. True killers who have chosen to protect instead of destroy. Sektar felt fear creep into his hearts. The Vector had ruled through strength, but they were about to face something stronger. They were about to face an entire species of predators, who had learned that the greatest strength came from protecting those who could not protect themselves. The war was changing, and the Vector were no longer the hunters. Captain Amy Carter crouched in the tall grass and watched the Vector patrol through her binoculars. The alien soldiers moved in a straight line down the dirt road, their weapons ready, but their eyes lazy. They had been ruling this world for 2 years. They thought they owned it. They were about to learn different. Count them, Danny, Amy whispered to the man beside her. Sergeant Danny Brooks was busy with a small device that looked like a metal box. Inside were enough explosives to turn the road into a crater. 12 soldiers, 1 vehicle, he reported. Same as always. Amy nodded. The Vector were creatures of habit. They did the same patrol at the same time every day. On a world full of peaceful, deer-like people, they had no reason to expect trouble. Kevin, you ready? Amy asked into her radio. Target acquired, came the reply from Lieutenant Kevin Stone. He was hidden in the rocks half a mile away with a rifle that could put a bullet through a coin at that distance. Rachel, status on the package. Dr. Rachel Kim's voice was excited, ready to deploy. This should give them something to think about. Amy smiled. The package was Rachel's special project, a biological agent designed to target Vector physiology. Specifically, it would not kill them, but it would make them very sick and very scared. New Eden had been a paradise before the Vector came. The native Eldari had built beautiful cities that looked like they grew from the earth itself. They had gardens that produced enough food for everyone. They had art and music and poetry. Now the cities were slave camps. The gardens were strip mines. The Eldari worked 18 hours a day, digging metals from their own world, while Vector overseers whipped anyone who moved too slowly. But the Eldari were learning. Amy and her team had been teaching them for 3 weeks now. They were learning that sometimes gentle people had to become wolves to protect their cubs. Here they come, Danny whispered. The Vector patrol was 50 meters away now. Amy could see their yellow eyes scanning the grass. They looked bored, confident. They had no idea that death was watching them from a dozen hiding places. Amy waited until the patrol was directly over Danny's surprise. Then she spoke one word into her radio. Now, the explosion threw dirt and alien bodies high into the air. The Vector vehicle flipped over and burst into flames. Screams filled the air as the survivors tried to figure out what had happened. That was when Kevin opened fire. His first shot took the head off a Vector sergeant. His second shot went through the chest of a soldier trying to help his wounded friend. Each shot came from a different position, as Kevin moved through the rocks like a ghost. The surviving Vector fired their weapons wildly at shadows and grass. They had no idea where the attacks were coming from. That was the point. Phase 2, Amy said into her radio. Eldari fighters rose from hidden positions all around the patrol site. They had learned human tactics well. Instead of charging with loud war cries, they moved quietly and struck fast. Vector soldiers who had been terrorizing helpless farmers suddenly found themselves fighting skilled guerrilla warriors. The battle was over in 3 minutes. 12 Vector soldiers were dead. 1 vehicle was destroyed. The humans in Eldari had not lost a single fighter. "Police the area," Amy ordered. "Take their weapons and radios. Leave the bodies where they are." "Why leave the bodies?" asked an Eldari fighter named Soft Voice. He was learning English quickly, like all his people. "Fear," Amy explained. "When the next patrol finds these bodies, they will be afraid. Fear makes people make mistakes." Soft Voice nodded slowly. His people had been too gentle for too long. They were learning that sometimes kindness was not enough. Amy's team moved through the forest toward their base camp. It was hidden in caves that the Eldari had shown them. The caves went deep into the mountains, where Vector sensors could not reach. "Report," Amy said, as they reached the communication station. "Vector reinforcements incoming," reported Corporal Tim Walsh, their radio operator. 3 ships, probably 500 soldiers total. Amy smiled. "Good. The more they send, the more we can teach." Over the past 3 weeks, Amy's team had destroyed 17 patrols, blown up for supply depots, and killed over 200 Vector soldiers. Each attack was different. Each attack came from nowhere and struck like lightning. The Vector were starting to crack. They were calling for more troops. They were changing their patrol routes every day. They were jumping at shadows and shooting at animals. "Ma'am," Tim said, holding up another radio message. "This one's from the Vector commander. He's asking his superiors for permission to use extreme measures against the civilian population." Amy's smile vanished. She had been waiting for this. When bullies could not catch the people fighting them, they always turned on the helpless. "Get me Commander Park on the fleet channel," Amy ordered. Lisa Park's face appeared on the small screen. She was on the bridge of a ship somewhere in space, coordinating the human war effort. "Amy, good to see you. How are things on the ground?" "We need air support," Amy said. "The Vector are about to start killing civilians." "Already arranged," Lisa replied. "Jake's squadron is 30 minutes out. They'll hit the Vector base while you keep the patrols busy." Amy nodded. This was how humans fought. Not just with individual courage, but with coordination and planning. While Amy's team made the enemy scared and angry, the fleet would hit them where it hurt most. "There's something else," Lisa said. "Intelligence reports that the Vector High Command is starting to understand what they're facing. They're calling us Death World predators in their official reports." "Good," Amy said. "Maybe they'll be smart enough to surrender." But Amy knew they would not surrender. The Vector were predators too, but they were the kind that only knew how to attack. They had never learned when to stop fighting. They had never learned that sometimes the smart thing to do was run away. That was their weakness. Humans had learned to be predators, but they had also learned to be pack animals. They protected each other. They worked together. They knew when to fight and when to think. The Vector only knew how to fight. "What about the Eldari?" Lisa asked. "How are they adapting to guerrilla warfare?" Amy looked around the cave where Eldari fighters were cleaning human weapons and studying tactical maps. A month ago, these had been farmers and artists and teachers. Now they were learning to be soldiers. "They're naturals," Amy said. "They know this world better than anyone. They're motivated to protect their families. And they're smarter than the Vector give them credit for." It was true. The Eldari had excellent memories and could learn new skills quickly. They were also naturally quiet and careful, which made them perfect for guerrilla warfare. Most importantly, they understood why they were fighting. "The Vector made a mistake," Amy continued. "They thought gentle people were weak people. They're learning the difference. A new message came through on the radio. It was from Kevin, who was still out in the rocks with his rifle. "Boss, you need to see this. The Vector just shot up a school, killed 30 Eldari children." Amy felt ice fill her veins. She looked at the Eldari fighters around her and saw the same cold anger in their eyes. The Vector had just made their biggest mistake yet. "Kevin, stay in position and keep watching," Amy ordered. "Danny, prepare charges for the Vector Command Center. Rachel, I want that biological weapon ready for mass deployment." She turned to Soft Voice and the other Eldari leaders. "Gather all your fighters. Tonight we stop playing games." The Eldari nodded. They had learned much from the humans, but the most important lesson was this. Sometimes gentle people had to become monsters to stop other monsters. The Vector thought they were fighting farmers and artists. Tonight they would learn they were fighting parents whose children had been murdered. There was no more dangerous enemy in the universe. War Chief Zakral sat in his command center and studied the reports. 17 patrols lost, 4 supply depots destroyed, over 200 soldiers dead, and they had not even seen most of their attackers. Worse, the attacks were getting more sophisticated. Someone was teaching the local animals how to fight like real soldiers. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "we have identified the source of resistance. Human special forces are operating on the surface." Zekral felt his blood run cold. He had heard the reports from other worlds. These humans were not like the other council species. They were predators who had learned to hunt in packs. "How many?" he asked. "Perhaps 50, sir. But they have trained hundreds of locals." Zekral stared at the tactical display. 50 humans had turned an entire world into a death trap. What would happen when more arrived? He was about to find out. Admiral Robert King stood in the command center of the UES Sovereign and watched the holographic display show 37 human warships moving through space like a school of sharks. Each ship carried thousands of soldiers, pilots, and specialists. Together, they represented the largest military force Earth had ever sent to fight an alien enemy. "Status report," Robert said to his staff. "All ships operational," reported Captain Nicole Gray. "Fighter squadrons ready for launch. Marine battalions prepared for orbital assault. Intelligence update," added Commander Marcus Webb, the fleet's chief analyst. "Vector forces are spread across 47 occupied systems. Their main shipyards are located at Keth Prime, heavily defended by 3 battle fleets." Robert studied the tactical display. Red dots showed Vector positions. Blue dots showed human forces. The math was simple. The Vector had more ships, but humans had better tactics and weapons. "What's our target priority?" asked Colonel Susan Davis, commander of the Marine contingent. "We hit their supply lines first," Robert explained. "Cut off their fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements. Then we move system by system, liberating occupied worlds. Finally, we take out their shipyards and force a surrender." It was a classic human strategy: patience, planning, and overwhelming force applied at the right moment. The Vacto had been expecting the humans to charge straight at their strongest positions like angry animals. They were about to learn that Earth's predators were also Earth's thinkers. "Sir," interrupted Lieutenant Commander Tony Walsh from the communication station. "Priority message from the Galactic Council. They're requesting an update on our progress." Robert almost smiled. The Council species were still having trouble understanding how warfare actually worked. They expected quick victories or noble defeats, like something from their peaceful stories. Real war was messier and took longer. "Tell them we're proceeding as planned," Robert said. "Results in 6 months. 6 months?" Captain Gray asked. "Sir, with respect, the Vector have been building their empire for decades. Shouldn't this take longer?" "Nicole," Robert said, using her first name because they had served together for 10 years. How long do you think it would take for a pack of wolves to bring down a herd of buffalo? Not long, if the wolves were smart about it. Exactly. The Vactor are big and strong, but they're not smart. They're going to make mistakes, and we're going to be ready for them. As if to prove his point, a new report came in from the intelligence section. The Vactor were moving their main fleet to protect Keth Prime, leaving their outer territories with minimal defense. There's our opening, Robert said. Nicole, take your stealth squadron to the outer rim. Start hitting their supply convoys. Make them think we're preparing to attack from that direction. Yes, sir. How many ships should I expect to face? According to our scouts, maybe 20 light cruisers spread across 5 systems. Against your 8 stealth bombers, they won't stand a chance. Nicole nodded and headed for the hangar bay. Robert watched her go and felt proud. His officers had trained for this their entire careers. They were about to show the galaxy what human military doctrine could accomplish. Marcus, Robert said to his intelligence chief, what do we know about Vactor psychology? What makes them tick? Dr. Marcus Webb was a thin man with thick glasses who had spent months studying Vactor communications and behavior. Their apex, predators from a harsh world, sir. But unlike humans, they never learn to cooperate with other species. They see everything as either food or competition. Weaknesses. They're overconfident. They've been winning for so long that they can't imagine losing. Also, their command structure is rigid. When we cut off communication between their fleets, they won't adapt quickly. Robert nodded. What about their home worlds? Any intelligence on civilian populations? Marcus pulled up another display. This is where it gets interesting, sir. Our deep space reconnaissance has discovered something the Galactic Council doesn't know. The Vactor aren't just conquering worlds for fun. Their home star is going nova. The hologram showed a massive red star surrounded by dying planets. They have maybe 50 years before their entire solar system becomes uninhabitable. They're not just warriors, sir. They're refugees. Robert stared at the display for a long moment. This changed everything. The Vactor weren't evil monsters who enjoyed causing pain. They were a desperate species, trying to survive the only way they knew how. How many Vactor are there total? Robert asked. Best estimate, 12 billion across all their worlds and colonies. And how many of those are military? Maybe 2 billion soldiers and support staff. The rest are civilians, families, children, workers. Robert felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. He had been prepared to destroy a military threat. Now he was looking at a refugee crisis that had turned violent. Sir, Captain Davis said quietly, what are your orders? Robert looked around the command center at his officers. These were good people who had volunteered to risk their lives protecting strangers. They deserved to know what they were really fighting for. The mission remains the same, Robert said. We stop the Vactor military from attacking peaceful worlds. But we also start thinking about what comes after the fighting. After, sir, when this war ends, we're going to have 12 billion displaced aliens with nowhere to go. The Galactic Council is going to need our help figuring out what to do with them. Over the next 3 weeks, Admiral King's fleet began its systematic campaign against Vactor positions. Nicole's stealth bombers struck supply convoys with surgical precision. Marine companies landed on occupied worlds to support local resistance movements. Human ships appeared without warning, destroyed their targets, and vanished before enemy reinforcements could arrive. The Vactor tried to respond, but their rigid command structure worked against them. When human attacks cut communication between their fleets, individual commanders were afraid to act without orders. When they did act, they fell into human traps. The most successful operation was the raid on the Keth Prime shipyards. Nicole led 8 stealth bombers through the Vactor defense network using gravitational shadows and electronic warfare. They destroyed 3 massive construction facilities and 24 partially built warships before the enemy even knew they were there. But the most important discovery came from Dr. Webb's analysis of captured Vector communications. The enemy high command was starting to panic. Reports about Deathworld predators were spreading through their military. Soldiers were refusing to fight. Some units were surrendering without firing a shot. "They're more afraid of us than we are of them," Webb reported to Admiral King. "Our reputation is becoming a weapon." Robert nodded, but he was thinking about the bigger picture. Fear was useful in the short term, but it would not solve the refugee problem. Somehow, humanity needed to find a way to turn enemies into allies. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the captured Vector officers, a war chief named Kethmer, requested a meeting with human commanders. When Robert agreed to talk with him, the alien warrior surprised him with a simple statement. "We know we cannot win this war," Kethmer said through a translator. "What we want to know is whether you will kill us all when we surrender." Robert looked at the scarred reptilian face on his screen. This was someone who had probably killed thousands of innocent beings. But he was also someone trying to protect his people, the only way he knew how. "We don't kill prisoners," Robert said. "We don't kill civilians, and we don't destroy species. Then what do you want from us? Stop attacking peaceful worlds. Release your slaves. Disarm your military. Help us find a solution that lets your people survive without hurting anyone else." Kethmer was quiet for a long moment. "You would do this, even after everything we have done?" "We're predators," Robert said, "but we're predators who have learned that the strongest pack is the one that protects everyone in it." The conversation lasted 3 hours. By the end, Robert had the outline of a plan that might save both the galaxy and the Vector species. But first, they had to win the war, and the Vector High Command was preparing one final, desperate attack. Reports reached the human fleet that every remaining Vector warship was converging on a single target, Earth itself. Over 200 alien vessels were preparing to strike at humanity's home world. "They think they can force us to negotiate by threatening our families," Robert told his staff. "Will it work?" Captain Gray asked. Robert smiled, and it was not a gentle expression. "They're about to find out what happens when you threaten a predator's cubs." The Vector fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system like a swarm of angry hornets. 217 warships spread across space in attack formation. Each ship bristled with weapons designed to destroy cities and kill millions of people. Supreme War Chief Kethral stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the blue and green world hanging in the distance. This was the home of the Deathworld predators who had been destroying his empire. Today, he would make them pay. "Target their orbital stations first," Kethral ordered. "Then we will burn their cities until they beg for mercy." But as his sensors swept the solar system, Kethral began to realize something was wrong. This was not a lightly defended farming world. Massive space stations floated between the planets. Weapons platforms hid among the asteroids. Defense satellites moved in perfect formations around the blue world. Worst of all, there were human warships everywhere. Not just a few patrol vessels, but entire fleets. Over 300 ships waited for the Vector attack. "Sir," reported his sensor operator, "we count 150 human vessels in the inner system. Another 150 are moving to intercept us from behind." Kethral felt cold fear creep up his spine. His scouts had reported that most human ships were fighting in Vector space, but these predators had somehow kept their strongest forces hidden at home. "Communications," Kethral ordered. "Send a message to the human fleet. Tell them we will destroy their world unless they surrender immediately." The answer came from a woman's voice, calm and deadly. "This is Fleet Admiral Christina Bell, commanding Earth Defense Force. You have entered sovereign human space with hostile intent. You have 30 seconds to surrender, or we will destroy you." Kethral laughed, but it sounded forced even to his own ears. "You are outnumbered and surrounded. We have come to take your world." War Chief Admiral Bell replied, "You're not surrounded. You're in the crosshairs." That was when the trap closed. The human ships had not been waiting randomly in space. They had been positioned to create a perfect killing field. When Admiral Bell gave the order to fire, every Vector ship found itself targeted by multiple human vessels. The first wave of missiles came from the orbital platforms. Hundreds of warheads streaked toward the Vector fleet like shooting stars. The second wave came from the hidden weapons in the asteroids. The third wave came from the human warships themselves. Kethral watched his fleet die in the first 5 minutes of battle. Ship after ship exploded or broke apart under the human assault. The few Vector vessels that managed to fire back found their shots absorbed by armor and shields, unlike anything they had faced before. "Retreat!" Kethral screamed into his communications system. "All ships, retreat!" But there was nowhere to run. Admiral Robert King's fleet had jumped in behind them, cutting off their escape route. The Vector were caught between two human forces, each one more powerful than anything they had ever fought. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "Incoming." Transmission from Admiral King. Robert King's face appeared on screen. He looked calm, professional, and absolutely deadly. "War Chief Kethral, I presume. I have a message for you from the people of Earth." "What message?" Kethral asked, expecting threats or demands for surrender. "Welcome to Earth," Robert said. "We understand you're refugees. We'd like to help." Kethral stared at the human admiral. Around them, the battle continued. Vector ships exploded every few seconds. His grand fleet was being destroyed piece by piece. But this human was talking about help. "What do you mean?" Kethral asked. "We know about your dying son," Robert said. "We know your people need new homes. We also know you've been trying to solve that problem by conquering others. There's a better way." Another explosion lit up space as 3 more Vector ships died. Kethral's fleet was down to less than 50 vessels, and those were badly damaged. "What do you propose?" Kethral asked. "Complete surrender of all military forces, release of all slaves and occupied worlds. In exchange, humanity will help you find new homes and teach you how to live in peace with other species." Kethral looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at him with fear and hope. They had expected to die today. Now they were being offered a chance to live. "And if we refuse?" Robert's expression never changed. "Then we finish this battle, and your species dies with your empire." It was not a threat. It was a simple statement of fact. The humans had the power to destroy every Vector ship and then hunt down their home worlds. But they were offering mercy instead. "How do I know you will keep your word?" Kethral asked. "Because we're predators who learn to protect instead of destroy," Robert said. "Because we know the difference between enemies and refugees. Because we believe 12 billion people deserve a chance to live." Kethral closed his eyes and thought about his people, his children, his grandchildren. The Vector way had brought them nothing but war and desperation. Maybe it was time to try something different. "I surrender," he said quietly. "All Vector forces surrender." The shooting stopped immediately. Human ships moved to rescue survivors from damaged vessels. Medical teams prepared to treat wounded aliens. What had been a battlefield moments before became a rescue operation. 3 months later, Dr. Alina Rodriguez stood before the Galactic Council once again. This time, she was not alone. Beside her sat former War Chief Kethral, now calling himself simply Kethral, the translator. Behind them sat representatives from dozens of species, including several former Vector slaves. "The Treaty of Terra has been signed," Alina announced to the assembled delegates. "The Vector Dominion is dissolved. All occupied worlds have been liberated. All slaves have been freed. Speaker Zethkara's crystal form sparkled with amazement. And the Vector themselves. What will become of them? They will learn, Elena said. Humanity has identified 17 uninhabited worlds suitable for Vector colonization. We will provide the technology and resources needed to terraform these worlds. In exchange, the Vector will disarm their military and contribute to galactic society as productive members. But how can we trust them? Asked a delegate from the Softwing people. They have caused so much pain and death. Cathrall stood slowly. His translator device converted his words into the musical language of the council. We cannot undo the harm we have caused, he said. But we can learn to be better. The humans have shown us that strength comes not from conquering others, but from protecting them, Alina nodded. The galaxy asked for protectors. Earth sent something better, teachers. We taught the Vector that there are other ways to survive. Now they will teach their own children to build instead of destroy. An Eldari representative stood up. This was Soft Voice, the same fighter who had learned guerrilla warfare from Captain Carter. The humans saved my world, he said. But more than that, they showed us how to save ourselves. They are predators, yes, but they are predators who choose to hunt only those who threaten the innocent. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Galactic Council voted unanimously to accept both the treaty and humanity's proposal for Vector rehabilitation. As the session ended, Speaker Zethkara approached Alina privately. I must ask, the crystal being said, why did you show them? Mercy. After everything they did, you could have destroyed them completely. Alina looked out through the station's viewing port at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, human ships were helping former enemies build new homes. Former slaves were learning to trust again. Children from a dozen species were growing up in a galaxy that was safer because predators had learned to protect. Because, Alina said, we're not just apex predators. We're pack animals. And the strongest pack is the one that includes everyone. 6 months later, the first Vector colony ship landed on a world they renamed New Beginning. The passengers were not conquerors or warriors. They were farmers and engineers and teachers, ready to build something better than an empire. Captain Amy Carter watched the landing from orbit aboard a human monitoring vessel. Beside her, former Warchief Sektar, now calling himself simply Sektar the Builder, studied agricultural reports. Your people have done something impossible, Sektar said to Amy. You turned killers into protectors, enemies into allies. How? Amy smiled and thought about her answer. We remembered that predators can choose their prey. The Vector were hunting the innocent. We chose to hunt the Vector. Now you're learning to hunt problems instead of people. And if we forget these lessons, if we return to our old ways, Amy's smile became sharper, more dangerous. Then we'll remind you, that's what protectors do. But she did not think that would be necessary. The Vector had learned what humans had learned long ago. The strongest predators were those who used their strength to protect the weak. The galaxy was safer now, not because the threat had been destroyed, but because it had been transformed. Predators still hunted among the stars, but now they hunted for justice, for peace, for the protection of those who could not protect themselves. The sheep had found their wolves, and the wolves had found their purpose.